Greetings, everyone, and welcome to the first webcast in MSDynamicsWorld.com's new EDI series. I'm Adam Berezin from MSDynamicsWorld.com, and I'm very happy to have all you here with us today for this event. We're very fortunate to be joined by Anne Gracken, President and Founder of ChainLink Research, one of the most widely respected research and advisory firms in supply chain today. Anne is here today to discuss her outlook on business priorities related to EDI and B2B integration. We invite you to add your feedback and ask questions today, and there are a couple ways to do this. First, you can use the Q&A tab that you'll see on the right side of the webcast session here. Second, please feel free to tweet your thoughts and questions. We're using the hashtag MSDWEDI to take questions and keep the conversation going on Twitter as well. And we'll be sure to leave some time at the end for you to ask Anne all of your questions. So without further delay, please allow me to welcome Anne Gracken.
Thank you, Adam, and hello, everybody, and thanks for joining us today. Obviously, this is a very important topic, and what amazes, I think, a lot of us who have been in the industry a while is how technologies and standards like EDI continue to thrive. However, there are a lot of challenges, of course, associated with standards and methods that have been around maybe as long as 40 years. So we'll discuss those today and talk a lot about business challenges and emerging technologies or technologies that are in use today that can really take us a distance in terms of trading partner and business-to-business communication. Now, you'll notice, just kicking off here, we're starting out with a poll, and it would be important, I think, of course, is to understand a little about you all, and later on I'll show you the research we did in terms of what people are buying in terms of EDI technology or managed file transfer. So if you want to take a minute now and answer the poll, I think it would be great to see for the folks on the call today what you're doing, what you're planning on doing, and again, I'll show you our research in a minute. So anyway, while we're waiting for this, I'll talk about the agenda, and then we'll really get going here. So I love history, so we'll start out with a picture of history, kind of the life or roadmap of EDI, and then we'll talk about what's driving the ongoing adoption of EDI and business-to-business, of course, integration. And we'll talk about issues on globalization and today's enterprise, what it looks like, et cetera, and then talk about the technology landscape. And then we'll take a peek into the future and see what's going to happen next in the technology universe here. So let's start with a bit of history. I personally love history charts, and I hope you do too, but I think it starts to give a little bit of perspective. I think one of the things that folks in technology feel sometimes we're stymied or we have limitations. Why did they do things the way they do, and why can't we break out of them? Or why do they continue to persist to be useful to us? So if we think about EDI specifically, I mean, it really got its launch way back in history at the sort of birth of the modem. And for most of us today, we're like, what's that all about? But the reality is that was a huge breakthrough for companies to be able to communicate system to system and business to business. It was slow, it was clunky, it was disrupted all the time by either systems were down or shut off at the sender or receiver, or there were disruptions in the communications lines. And so, great innovation. Why don't we have a value-added network service provider who can collect our transmissions and store them and continue to attempt to communicate with our customers, our trading partners. And interestingly, techniques like that are still very much alive today. In spite of the fact that many of us have moved off of vans and onto the internet and other techniques that have come along, the basic concept of connecting to trading partners and dealing with issues of sending and receiving technologies, on and off switches and all this kind of stuff, it's very much alive with us. But having said that, you know, we've moved on significantly. Data standards, absolutely key. We continue to develop them. But most importantly, what really drives our relationship with technology, if you will, and vice versa, is this issue on how are our value chains, our business structures evolving over the years. And no doubt, the Internet gave birth, if you will, the ability to have supply chain networks and virtualization in business and outsourcing. All that was enabled by all this B2B communication techniques that we have today. But conversely, our drive, if you will, for globalization and integrating in new and interesting ways with trading partners also drives more of this technology. So we'll talk a lot about that as we move on. So I know a lot of you on the phone are strong EDI users today, but just to catch up for a few of you, if maybe this topic is a little bit new, but we'll go through this pretty quickly. EDI is a standard. A lot of people associate it with, okay, it's a technology, yeah, but we really need to think about EDI as a standard that's enabled by a variety of technologies, such as mapping software, translating software. Translating software allows your individual approach, if you will, or your individual corporate standard, if you will, to communicate with a myriad of different trading partners. The fact is, a lot of companies have their preferences, so a company sometimes needs to broadcast something, and every single one of their recipients has a different protocol or a different requirement. So this need for translating doesn't go away. So taking our information, translating it, turning it into the required formats to move across the Internet, these things still are important aspects of the sort of EDI umbrella. Now today, we have choices, if you will. We have software, we have vans, and we have cloud. So you can buy your own software, and you can set up your own mailboxes and get your customers' mailboxes and drive that whole process yourself. You can use the, excuse me, the value-added network, and of course today we have cloud EDI. Now cloud EDI is an evolving service, if you will, but it's extremely popular with small to mid-sized businesses because most of the cloud providers provide a tremendous amount of business services. They can take your spreadsheets or any kind of format and do the mapping, the translating, as well as the communicating on the behalf of companies. And small companies in particular really love that approach. Now, while we're doing our alphabet soup, we also have this file transfer, secure file transfer, and managed file transfer buzzwords that are out there. FTP has probably as long a history as EDI, and we'll talk about is that history over shortly. The evolution of that was how do we make this secure? And today, the managed file transfer is all about how do we provide a centralized management facility, if you will, over the techniques we used in the past. So we'll talk a great deal about that in this session as well. So moving along, so why do we care about all these EDIs and other standards today? The reality is we still have a lot of pain in the supply chain. This is just an example of service supply chain, but you can apply it to financial services, healthcare, or any industry, if you will, where you have products with multiple names, you have multiple trading partners, and they all have to communicate with each other all the time. And so there are multiple types of communications that go on. One of the things that EDI and other standards like it have done over the years really evolve the sets of transactions and documents and those kinds of things that can be shared amongst trading partners. So This is the world we live in, and we care very deeply about getting all these pieces working together. But as we know, it's even way more complicated than this picture implies. This, for example, is basic EDI mapping, if you will. What are the transaction types in the apparel industry, for example? Just to build a shirt or a pair of sneakers or a jacket or something like that takes multiple trading partners, and this is actually a simplistic view of what goes on here. And if you think about these processes running over a 12 to 18-month period from design through acquisition of product, manufacturing, all the way through the retail and sale, we're talking about a tremendous amount of standards and transaction types. And again, this is actually a simple picture of what goes on here. This, of course, is one of the pictures around healthcare. Now, healthcare has been much more of an evolving standard, especially in the last couple of years with HIPAA and healthcare reform. And so there's a lot of interest here, not just in the transaction types, but a lot more interest in privacy and security, because an industry like this, unlike the apparel, which is more of a B2B, actually includes consumer communication. This environment also includes things like scanning and faxing and translating those kinds of documents that might come from doctors or patients, et cetera, and translating them into secure transaction types and document types for storage and record keeping and those kinds of things. So this is a huge moving target in the healthcare industry. So why is this important besides the sort of backroom system-to-system issues, is because this data percolates up with you right into the day-to-day management dashboards of the business. Here, of course, I have a supply chain example, but it really can apply to any type of business. I'm building things, I'm shipping things, are they in transit, when are they coming? You know, all these kinds of issues associated with how do I manage my business? How do I make sure everything's okay? All those kinds of things are driven by EDI today and continue to be important to businesses across, you name the industry. Now, here is an example, of course, and turns out to be fairly simple, of the concept of mapping. And my goal here, a lot of you are very familiar with this, and some of it is just to recap and review and to catch a few people up as well. But if you think about where we are today, there are a lot of people out there in the industry who still spend their job worrying about these kinds of things. And I was talking to some folks from GS1, the standards organization, and they were talking about the resurgence, if you will, of requests they're getting from companies to come in and educate them about soup to nuts around EDI and barcoding and how they do these kinds of functions. Because over the years when EDI kicked off, you would have a whole team of maybe 10 to 12 people in the company building and mapping and translating, executing all this stuff. And now maybe the jobs boil down to 1 or 2 people, and then they retire. And nobody knows how to do it anymore. So this is you know, a challenge that's still with us, and of course, mostly we're hoping our software does this for us, but the reality is there's an ongoing demand for people in the market who know the tool sets, who know the industries, and know how to do this kind of work. So EDI has always been growing, and one of the things I find very interesting is, in spite of its longevity in the industry, that we still have pretty low compliance, even from the most powerful companies. Walmart has a supplier revival program, if you will, reliability program, and they have some fascinating statistics about on-time delivery of data and compliance, et cetera. And they're one of the better companies. But across retail, there's about a 70% compliance in something like advanced ship notifications, which are the most basic and probably one of the most important transmissions out there. But even simple things that are totally in our self-interest, like purchase order and payment transactions, are not adhered to as strongly as one would think. And so beyond those, many of the transaction types are never even done unless there's a specific mandate or a specific set of processes that a small ecosystem of trading partners wants to get done, and that's the vehicle to do it. So the standards are out there, but we're not there. The other thing that's very interesting is this sort of drive for more and more auto ID technologies, more kinds of labels. I went from this site to that site to this site to that site, and every single step along the way there's another barcode or another RFID tag and another transmission. And this particularly shows up in industries that have serialization, so high-tech, healthcare, et cetera, where I'm building product and I have all these gazintas, serial number into serial number into serial number. I've got to collect all this information. I've got to label it, whether paper labels or e-pedigree systems, et cetera. And all of this information can go either through B2B cloud systems or EDI transaction environments. Now, along with all of those issues are this exploding regulation issue that's happening with global trade. So whether it's in the food industry, retail, import, export type issues, it just keeps going. So there are tons of compelling reasons, if you will, why we continue to take an interest in EDI. And I've been surprised of the sort of resurgence of interest in the standards as well as, of course, the evolution of the technology. And as I mentioned, we've got compliance issues going out, the wazoo here, across multiple industries. The last 3 years, not just in the U.S., but in the EU and even in China, there's been a whole bunch of regulations passed around safety, privacy, those kinds of things that are driving up the number of transactions and the need for those transactions to be secure. So big issues for companies, and in other words, they continue to grapple with this as well. So we know that. We also know that outsourcing continues. So I've got many more trading partners than I had before, and I want to know what they're doing. So the other thing is all the different media types that we've had to deal with. So, you know, we have barcode scanning and all that we've had to deal with a long time, but we have so many more document types and unstructured data and media types, you know, photographs and streaming videos and streaming data and all sorts of things that, you know, EDI initially was never set out to address all those kinds of things. So standards bodies continue to thrive, if you will, because these things keep coming along, and we need this common language to make sure we can talk to each other and it's all secure. One of the areas when we've done our research that a lot of people have told us is really, really important is the electronic proof of delivery. And something like this really hits on the cash management of the business with strong ROI. And very simply stated, I've shipped something, I want validation that it was shipped successfully and the customer is signed for it. Because if I can get that, I can invoice and I can get paid. So instead of the blame game, if you will, going back and forth between trading partners, did I really receive it? I didn't receive it. In retail, and fine my suppliers because of issues. Now I have that proof. If I have that proof, I can invoice, I can get paid, and it has a huge impact and justifies investment in technology, if you will. And the return of cash to many businesses has been significant just with the implementation of electronic proof of delivery. So as we mentioned, it goes on in terms of legislation and standards and those kinds of things that just, whether corporate-wide, industry-wide, or government or trading block, it's relentless. The other thing that I think is really important is this need for speed. If we look at supply chains maybe a decade ago, you know, working across the supply chain, planning, delivery, all that could take, you know, significant amount of time. Now, as we know, we have these what we call zero inventory environments where people pay for product, and that kicks off the build cycle, if you will. So this idea for instant information, if you will, because we're managing at such high velocity, becomes really important as well. But one of the challenges in these environments is this ability, if you will, to not just see one up, one down, but to see across the value chain. And this is where EDI presents a lot of challenges, if you will. One of the surveys we did was we asked about 300 companies in healthcare, food and beverage, high tech, aerospace and defense, retail, CPG, and the energy industry about the need for sharing information across multiple tiers in the supply chain. And was very interesting. You know, a decade or more ago, people didn't want to share. I don't want to share information. That's proprietary, right? Nowadays, I think a fresher generation, and also with outsourcing, as you can see across the information movement of goods, service information, end-user consumption, the blue in the chart is the very important to share information across multiple tiers in the supply chain. EDI is a one up, one down. It doesn't give me the multi-tier synchronization picture that I'm looking for. And that's where cloud or supply chain network solutions and those types of things become very, very important in the management of ecosystems today. So yesterday's approaches need an upgrade, if you will. I need speed. If I'm hopping in and out or waiting to get in and out of firewalls, if I'm only doing one up, one down, if I'm doing cloud-to-cloud integration, system-to-system, person-to-person, multiple media types, multiple communication vehicles, say, for example, shipping an email with a document versus a system-to-system, right? These all challenge the methods of the past. And on top of that is this whole, the van charge, if you will, you know, back to that modem story and those 010 bits running across the telephone lines. Well, how did you charge for things? Character charges. And you know what? A lot of companies still have these legacies. So that costs them a lot of money. And a lot of them are looking for other techniques that say, look, you know, I want a managed environment. I don't want to have to pay for every time I send an email or a transmission. I don't want to pay by the drink anymore. I want a service that I acquire, just like if I bought an ERP system or something, and how much business I transact in my business, I'm not going to keep paying Oracle or SAP or Infor or CISPRO, if you will, for that, or Microsoft. That's my business, right? So a lot of companies are looking for other solutions and have purchased other solutions that take them away from that old-fashioned character charge. So let's talk about this new approach here. So one of the things that a lot of companies, I think the progressive ones, understand is that it's all about continuing to invest. And technology, just like any other function in the company, if you will, is a constantly evolving environment. And we have to accept that it's never done. You know, we put the system in place, it's done. No, it's not done. That will serve our needs for now. But if we're a living, breathing, growing type of organism as a business, we will continue to need new techniques, or we have problems that haven't been solved. So this would be a good point, I think, if we can show the polling results, and then I'll show you what our research showed in terms of the interview we did. So my question today is, okay, how many of us on the phone today are using EDI? And interestingly, you know, a little over a third. Some of us are planning it in the future, very near future, plan to use it this year. So it looks like, okay, this is the year where we're making that decision. Managed file transfer, not so many today, but also a pretty good number for the future there. So we have the 40%. So I think that's pretty interesting. So obviously this is a buying crowd we have on the phone today. So I'll show you our research that we did, now every year our company does the, we call this business priorities. So business priorities 2009, 10, 11, and now this is 12. So this is very fresh research that we just published beginning of February, and it shows the blue is the buy, implement, and the red is evaluate. Now, what's very interesting, if you see the third one down there, the B2B EDI messaging thing, that's a pretty high up on the what's important, what we're going to buy and implement this year. And you notice the blue buy, that's very, very high. It's much higher than some of the other technologies that have been very popular, if you will, in the supply chain for a very long time. And by the way, that's up from previous years. EDI was way down on the bottom for many, many years. But again, it's a new EDI. It's not the old EDI, if you will, of the past. And we'll talk about how companies are getting that done in a minute. So what that looks like, okay, is obviously I need the standard, so EDI, and again, mapping and translating. But a lot of companies are looking at a cloud-based techniques to do that, or they're looking at, once they have a standard data format, is to use the communication vehicle of a managed file transfer. So we'll talk about that momentarily. So when we talk about B2B integration, what are we talking about in terms of technologies? So we have the EDI van, and you notice that's a low growth environment. And then we have compliance issues. Again, all that standard stuff. How do I know that all my data is in compliance and my documents and all that? And there are technologies that help me just make sure that the data and the formats and the approaches that I'm using fit the standard that I have to do. And now I have these other techniques, the secure, the managed file transfer. I need security and encryption technology. Sometimes those are embedded in my middleware and my MST Solutions, and sometimes not. Sometimes a big enterprise will also buy other types of security and encryption technologies to go along with this and sit on top. But most of the more sophisticated leading managed file transfer companies embed all that encryption in the solution, so the end users don't have to worry about that. But as you can see, these are pretty high growth areas, this sort of newer approach to handling that. So why do I think about a managed file transfer solution than a straight EDI, moving an 852, if you will, through a van or even a cloud? The fact is, when I'm integrating with trading partners and customers, I have so many types of data types, and this is just actually a pretty simple picture of what this all looks like. But not only I have different kinds of data constructs, whether they're point-of-sale data or barcoding data or system transaction data or documents like purchase orders or proposals or design documents and things like that. It's what platform they're moving over. So it's not just the internet system-to-system world. Everywhere you go, everybody's got their touch, iPad application. So we're moving it from the enterprise onto the mobile platform. That's a stampede going on right now. And there are a lot of industries where, whether you're a salesperson or a supply chain person in a warehouse or in a yard, or other types of business professionals walking around the factory with your touchpad, is the way companies are going. I'm amazed how fast it is. Usually the upgrade in technologies, those of us who remember the I want a PC on my desk movement in company, it really took a number of years before companies faced up to the fact that that's the way things were going. The same thing with the cell phone. Okay, all employees really need mobile phones, and maybe we can just pay them for their home phones. No, we got to standardize. Everybody's going to use the same phone. The iPad is moving way faster than that. And I think that has to do with the social mobile aspect, if you will, of the working world that we're in today. So, and that's what we see when we did the survey, and later on I'll show you a link where you can get the whole business survey, but a lot of this issue around mobile platforms, social networking, and collaboration were all technology areas that companies were also going to embrace this year, because it isn't just about transacting the data, it's the people talking to each other about the data that's becoming really, really important. And again, managed file transfer technology will help out in that way too. So let's talk about sort of EDI and sort of where it shows up. I look at this world as a communications aspect and a data aspect. The data, again, is what kind of data, what kind of standards and protocol am I working with? And the communications vehicle is on what medium, if you will, do I communicate this data? And very simply, I start with paper as a barcoding and work my way up, you know, Internet XML to cloud and mobile and all that kind of stuff. So it's important to understand, if you're purchasing these systems, that these are two aspects of what you're looking at. A lot of EDI vendors will come in and, you know, they can give you the whole enchilada. There's no doubt about it. But you do need to look at these as kind of two pieces, if you will, when you're evaluating a solution. So let's talk about managed file transfer, because I can move my EDI transaction over the managed file transfer technology. And that's what a lot of companies are doing, the ones who are doing EDI for the first time, and even old-timers are out there. They have EDI communication with certain clients, and then they have other clients, for example, a Walmart that wants an AS2 or an Amazon, they're using a managed file transfer service to use the AS2. So FTP, file transfer, it's 30-plus-year-old technology. What that basically means is I can spawn right out of a program a file transfer. Companies have millions of lines of code out there. Even if they've sort of upgraded to an SAP, they still have all this legacy code all over the place, and it's not secure. Nobody knows what it's doing, and it doesn't have management and monitoring, so there's very little oversight in understanding what is being transferred, if you will, out of the code. And that also goes for email and the sharing of documents, et cetera, et cetera. So companies are looking for the managed file transfer approach. And why that's different than an EDI for VAN, for example, is managed file transfer solution is basically a monitoring system that can also schedule your transactions. And instead of a store and forward, which is what a VAN does, is take your information, put it in a hub someplace, and then attempt to deliver to the mailbox, that what we call the DMZ is a streaming environment that's an encrypted environment. Now, the idea of streaming means that the data doesn't hang out in the DMZ, if you will, and that, according to security experts, makes it more secure. So you're seeing a lot of companies who use VANs, if you will, adopt this managed file transfer approach, and then also people have used file transfer to move other kinds of documents, now migrating into the managed file transfer solution. And the MFT can handle basically all those document types that I talked about before. So it can use your EDI transactions as well as other types of documents. So what's driving that evolution or adoption to the managed file transfer? So away from the VAN, if you will, is the cost issue. And the security issues. So companies are looking to save costs. They're looking to reduce headcount and fine-tuning and handcrafting and working the creation of the documents and making sure that they're delivered securely, et cetera. And then away from the FTP or the secure file transfer to the managed file transfer is most of the FTPs may have one protocol But as I mentioned earlier, sometimes somebody has to broadcast a transaction, and each customer has a different protocol or a different technique. So you need a piece of software that'll translate that for you and deliver it for you. But you need it done securely. And then there's this cool thing called non-repudiation. Did it get delivered? Now, if you do business in retail, for example, ship to retailers, they're like, if I didn't get my EDI transaction, then I'm going to fine you. So I need to make sure that they can't repudiate, if you will, that they received it. So, and again, these issues around scheduling and workflow automation and monitoring. So if things go wrong, I know what's going on. So thus the introduction, if you will, of the MST solutions out there. So let's move forward here. So what are my options? I can do EDI translators and use VAN. I can use EDI translators and manage file transfers. I can do the whole thing in the cloud with a service provider. And I can spawn these things out of applications as well. So something just to remember if you're out there evaluating and adopting that EDI does not equal MFT. They're partners, if you will. But the MFT can handle other types of files besides your 852s and those kinds of things. Again, the media and the email and those kinds of things. And the same thing with file transfer does not equal managed file transfer. Again, this ability to have a management structure that sits on top of all my file transfers that go across the company. And most people in business love that because, you know, nobody wants leaks in the company, if you will. So you're going to get these slides afterwards so you can kind of look at these in more detail later on. But when we look at the managed file transfer environment, everybody's heard of the you send it freeware and Dropboxes and out in the freeware world, if you will. And then we have secure file transfer options. And these tend to be, you know, if you're only using a single protocol and just have a few trading partners, these solutions, you should take a look at them because there's no point in having the big, more expensive app when you really have a modest requirement. And there, you know, there's tens of thousands of companies out there that's just what you need. Managed file transfer, again, a lot more management, a lot more protocols, if you will. And a lot more visibility and standards and those kinds of things and dashboards that people need to actually manage the environment. And then we have the old guard EDI guys who also have been building managed file transfer solutions as well. So in terms of sort of a vendor landscape, if you will, this is, and if I've left anybody out, I apologize and let me know. I aim to try and get all the players in here, but you can see there's a huge range of companies out there. A lot of the companies provide multiple services. So as I mentioned, a lot of the EDI guys do have managed file transfer. When I talk to people who've implemented MFT, the pure play guys often can have a stronger solution, but kind of the multi-solution EDI and the pure play MFT, when it comes to management and monitoring of what I want to do here and making sure it's secure and it represents a productivity improvement for my working environment, these are really, really strong players out there, if you will. And of course, for some companies, your ERP provider will have this stuff embedded, and you might have to buy an extra piece, if you will, or they'll give you a list of integration partners that they work with. But what we've seen with a lot of the cloud providers and supply chain and ERP and CRM is they have those services actually embedded. You may not have to pay extra for. They expect file transferring to go on all the time. So anyway, you'll have these charts after the webinar, and you know, if you have questions about it, don't hesitate to shoot me off an email on that. So just a few other points here, and then I'll get to the future and wrap up. A lot of us do this stuff in our non-business life. The consumer market is a different environment, but a lot of these companies have consumer products as well as business products. And so similar, sometimes these aren't as secure. A lot of people say, well, why can't I use these products in my business? Maybe that's not such a good idea, but some of these companies have consumer products and they have business products. So a lot of us are part of the SOHO or small office, home office. I mean, it's a huge trend globally, but especially in the U.S. And that's a community that digs around looking for freeware a lot. But what our surveys show when we did a SMB survey is most of those companies expect to pay for the solution, and they look at freeware as a sort of try before you buy. So even companies like a Usendit have a, buy button, if you will, and you can upgrade into richer services, if you will. And a lot of the MFT players have, the free trial. Of course, they're going to cut you off at a certain point, but they do have free trial, and they're pretty flexible about how to get you started in this environment. So let's take a look at our future, and then hopefully we get some good questions here. So what are we trying to do here at the end of the day? We're trying to create this single version of the truth. Nowadays, this used to be a picture of an enterprise, but as we all know today, this is not an enterprise. This is a trading partner network, from financial services to customer service to wholesaler and distribution services that can sell your products, and et cetera, et cetera. And we need to drive all this with good data standards and good communication techniques that allow us to be real-time all the time, if you will. And not everything has to be real-time, but this idea of the important data that I need to see now because I need to take action on, I need it. And I need it not just delivered to my systems, but probably down to the mobile level as well. And so one of the big drivers that's occurred in sort of the last decade or so is this idea of having a collaboration platforms, if you will. And they kind of line up in two environments, the sort of customer side, customer life cycle, which is more the demand side. And then we have the product life cycle, so the design, the manufacturing. So there are cloud hubs or internet solutions, we used to call them out on the internet, that provide that constancy, if you will, in terms of transactions and documents and those kinds of things. Those sort of sit on top of a EDI solution, but they're still fed by EDI transactions often. So we have data sharing going on, and then below that, again, we still have these issues on data communications. So if we think about that, and we're really kind of moving from this old model, if you will, many of us are already in this new model, a lot of virtual companies and high tech and healthcare, et cetera, and medical devices. When these companies got started, they never thought of building their own manufacturing or logistics. They immediately went to trading partners and contract manufacturers to do that stuff for them. So they got right away. It was all about communication over the internet with trading partners and those kinds of things. So they think about their world as a world of developing strategic relationships, using third-party platforms, and having visibility, if you will, or orchestrating their business processes. So I really need this kind of 1-2 punch, if you will, again, is this cloud-based visibility and, again, the standard way of doing the actual transactions, the ordering, the paying, et cetera. Now, one more thought I'll leave you with, and then I'll wrap up here, is this sort of environment off the grid or offline, if you will, around RFID and mobile and those kinds of things. In the last couple of years, we've seen huge innovations in the RFID and barcoding world. And last year, we had a real confluence of real intelligence down at these, minuscule device level technology. So this idea, for example, the top one is visual intelligence. So this is an RFID tag, but it's basically using the same technologies as Kindle that you can read, write, and you can show graphics and barcodes and operator instructions and those kinds of things, and that can be put on with a sticky, it's embedded in plastic, and that can go with a Kanban through the manufacturing process or a shipping container. I don't need to be on the grid. I can just read it with my mobile device, and I can get my operator instructions and etc. The one right below it is that tiny little dot on there. That's the chip with the RFID tag. That one is a huge data store, if you will, of information. That particular tag is used in aerospace and defense of Boeing and Airbus and guys like that. And it has all the pedigree information about product and parts as they go through the supply chain, and they're added to and maintained and those kinds of things, and advanced ship notifications put on those little chips. So I'm kind of bypassing the traditional systems. And that data standard there, that EDI, keeps popping up in these environments if you look at these things. And that third green one, that's a tag that has a sensor in it, and as you can see, the black plastic above it, that's a piece of a shipping container, and that plugs in there, and that'll give you temperature sensor and all the information I talked about before. It's not visual, but I can cram a lot of information, pedigree, temperature, all that, as my stuff goes through the supply chain. So these also, interesting, the same root of the EDI standards world, the EPC Gen 2 kind of universe, if you will, of data standards that drive how I write to these devices, how I read these devices. But what's interesting about this, again, communication separated from the standard, as these kind of things are all offline technologies that I can choose to integrate in my traditional systems, but not. And what's very interesting is for those of you in these particular industries, aerospace, automotive, even manufacturing, if you're using whip tracking or Kanban type systems, and food and beverage that care about product quality and those kinds of things, even pharmaceuticals, these kind of techniques are being used more and more. And so when I think about my future, if you will, in the EDI world, I think about these multiple communication techniques and how there's a right technique, if you will, based on the kind of transaction that I'm doing across the supply chain. So I'll skip that one, and let me see if we've got questions here. I'd love to have questions. Okay.
And somebody, this is Adam, somebody asked, is it possible to get a copy of the slides? I can actually answer that. The recording will be available on demand starting either tomorrow or Monday, and we'll send a note out to all of the attendees today, letting them know where to find that link.
Great.
Yep.
Absolutely. And again, if you have questions too, you know, sometimes when you look at it, you go, hey, now I want to ask a question. And, you know, here's my email. And also, here are 2 links that you'll probably find some additional research that'll be really useful to us, is our website, which I spelled wrong. Those typos. But it's clresearch.com, and we have a whole research library of stuff on EDI, ERP, Unified Communications, collaboration, and a whole landing page, if you will, filled with information about cloud. And that's at that link there, the ChainLinkResearch.com/cloud. So there's a lot of goodies there too that some of them you have to, you know, register for and some not, but all of that is shareable content. We're happy to share with you, and again, if you have questions later on, don't hesitate to send me an email.
And we actually have a question that just came in. Somebody asked, can you please summarize the limitation of EDI technology?
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. So as I mentioned earlier, there's a couple of things. One is if we see EDI as a technology, not a standard, then my issue is the visibility across the supply chain. So that's issue number one. I can get a one up, one down. Sender and receiver, that I can get that. But I can get that over time. I don't necessarily get that fast enough, if you will, and that's the second problem. So one up, one down only, not supply chain wide. Secondly is the need for speed. I translate, send through the firewall, send across, get it in, translate it, pop it in my ERP system or whatever. That can take an hour. It can take a day. I'm looking for real time. And not all applications require that real time, but if you're looking for this sort of dashboard view of the business process, your supply chain or your sales or whatever, then EDI may not be, the technologies of EDI like the vans and those kinds of things may not be the approach that you're looking for. And again, that's where the portals and clouds and those kinds of things can provide that broader visual capability, if you will. Anything else I can answer today?
Actually, have another one that just came in. If I purchase or use an existing Microsoft solution, do I still need an EDI solution?
Yes. Microsoft has a bunch of partners, and the partners line up in two ways, if you will. They sell software and those kinds of things, and then we have consulting. Now, one of the things, I say that yes, but now I'll punt back and say really depends on how much transacting you're going to do. You have one or two trading partners and one protocol. There are techniques that you can use. I hate to say there's some freeware techniques that you can download. Some of the Microsoft ERP packages, manufacturing-centric ones, have translations in them and those kinds of things. So if I can get that translating done in the proper protocol that my customer wants, may not actually need to purchase a separate solution. But it really depends on how many trading partners, how many protocols I need. None of the ERP guys keep up with the depth and breadth of all the protocol types that are out there. So you really need to look at what's my customer or my trading network's requirement around the protocol, and then do they have that? Do they have that translation capability? And if not, you're going to have to go buy something. And again, if you have simple needs, one protocol, that kind of thing, you can look at that very inexpensive type, simpler products. I'll be coming out with like a mini report in a couple of weeks, and I'll show you some of the solution providers have the small business or the SME or SMB type solutions, and then some of them, and then they also have the sort of bigger enterprise stuff. So you'll be able to look at those charts, or if you're already talking to a company, be sure to ask them, hey, I only have this one protocol, I only have 3 trading partners, don't you have the SMB version for me? And many of them do, especially companies like Clio and Ipswich and guys like that. They partner with the Microsoft community. They have SMB type products, and again, they have the big enterprise as well. Any more?
All right, I think that seems to be all the questions that we have. Once again, if you have any further questions for Ann, please feel free to email her directly. You have the email address right there on the screen. So I guess we'll wrap it up. Ann, I just want to thank you again for presenting. That was a fantastic presentation.
Thank you.
And yeah, our pleasure. And for all of you that attended, please once again look for that link to view the presentation on demand, and stay tuned for more exciting EDI-focused presentations in the near future. Thanks again, and have a great day.
Thank you. Bye, everybody.